Thank you. Thank you, chairpersons, for that introduction. Thank you, Dr. Kumaravel and team, for this invite. Always a pleasure to be in Tamil Nadu. Anaivarukkum vanakkam. The topic which has been given to me is androgen therapy in women. But maybe the question is, எதுக்கு திடீர்னு விமனுக்கு இப்போ ஆண்ட்ரோஜன் கொடுக்கணும்னு நினைக்கிறாங்க? மென்னுக்கு வந்து ஈஸ்ட்ரோஜன் தெரப்பி பற்றி எதுவுமே யோசிக்கல, விமனுக்கு மட்டும் யோசிக்கிறாங்க. Might be an opening sentence for you to think about while I present the evidence and why they are thinking about this and what has been studied and whether there's any logic or reasoning behind looking at using androgen therapy in women. And also generally there's an opinion that if there were more women leaders, world leaders, maybe we would not be in so much turmoil. Maybe they would have just met up at a table and discussed. Dr. Sriram Madhavan has many things running on his mind. So quickly to move forward, we are a mixed conundrum. Men have female hormones. Similarly, women also have male hormones. The male hormones or the androgens come from two sources, the adrenal gland and the ovaries. Now, testosterone and estrogen itself, they can convert to each other, and that happens in many situations. Like for example, for growth to occur, we need sex steroids, but the predominant receptors which are present in the growth plate happen to be estradiol receptors. So even in boys and men, testosterone gets converted locally to estrogen and the action is mediated to the estrogen receptor. So this whole thing is very fluid if you think about it. And DHEAs and testosterone, as you can see, can get converted to androstenedione, which can then get aromatized to give rise to estrogen as well. Now, where are the androgen receptors expressed in the female body? There are quite a few organs, but the areas of interest, which is getting people to talk about the use of androgen in women, stems from these particular organs. There is some connection in the brain to suggest that maybe androgen receptor density and presence and distribution could affect cognition, also maybe mood enhancement. There's also some interest in the differential effect of androgens and estrogen on the cardiovascular system. While estrogen predominantly offers cardioprotection for women, testosterone also does have some differential effect in that its effect in causing vasodilation or relaxation is greater through nitric oxide production. Of course, if you take a look at bone mineral density of men and women, men overall tend to have a greater bone mineral density. So there is always an interest to see that, okay, maybe after menopause, if we give androgen, can the bone mineral density go up? Can the fracture risk come high? In fact, maybe a few years ago, this was something which was being, maybe a few decades ago, actively researched as well. Of course, you're also thinking, can we prevent malignancies or prevent recurrence with the use of androgens, especially in organs like the endometrium? So those are all the various areas in which androgens are studied. But what is probably has the maximum evidence is related to libido, with proven benefits in studies. What is not proven but has been studied a little bit more in detail is bone mass and sarcopenia. And where you should be completely cautious will be in any outcomes related to the breast and also the cardiovascular risk profile itself. Does the level of androgen change, right? So if you take a look at each monthly cycle, in women, there is a slight peak of testosterone which happens around ovulation. After that, it kind of settles down. But if you take a look at the lifespan of women, the androgen levels tend to peak roughly coinciding with the time we hit peak bone mass, although I'm not really sure if this association is the only factor playing a role there. But around perimenopause and after that, there is a slight decline in the androgen levels itself. Whether it goes completely down or not, and what might be normal range in women, below what point do you call it going low, all of these are not defined. So in one simple question, if you're asking, can I do a blood test and find out if androgen levels are normal or if they are deficient? No, we can't do that because there is no cutoff, and there is other nuances to it as well. Now, testosterone in the bloodstream exists in 3 different forms. Predominant form, it exists as being bound to this globulin called as sex hormone binding globulin, up to 66%. About 1/3 of it is bound to albumin, which is bioavailable, but it is still bound. And then a sliver of the testosterone, which is 1% of it, is free testosterone. So you can clearly see that if there are alterations to your SHBG level, your testosterone level is going to change. Now, estrogen is a hormone which causes SHBG levels to go high. So clearly when you have menopause, you're going to have a low total testosterone if you're checking total testosterone. Similarly, if you have a liver condition, it could be hepatitis, it could be cirrhosis, any of these conditions which can alter, or even nephrotic syndrome for that matter, which can alter serum albumin level, again, your total testosterone level is going to come down. And secondly, the normal range of testosterone in men is, let us say, 300 to 1200 nanogram per deciliter. And all of these assays are designed to study it in this range. The normal range of testosterone in women is less than 60 nanogram per deciliter. So the assays are not at all equipped to pick up total testosterone level. And if you take a look at free testosterone, that is 1% of the total testosterone. Right? So the free testosterone assays which our patients are coming up with laboratory reports with are extremely erroneous, extremely unreliable for all practical purposes. So those are the 2 problems with using assays and cutoffs for defining androgen deficiency. And you have other endocrine conditions where you are worried that the androgen level will come down. Like for example, if somebody has primary adrenal insufficiency, we just learned that adrenal is an important source of adrenal androgen in women. Now you're worried, if the adrenal androgen is less, what effects will it have on women? And then the other group might be somebody who has hypopituitarism, again where the ACTH signal comes down. Again, you're concerned if DHEAS levels can go down. And the third situation where we are worried is ovaries are a source of androgen in women as well. So if you have somebody who has premature ovarian insufficiency, should we now be supplementing androgen along with estrogen? So these are all the clinical situations where we've all at some point wondered, will the bone mineral density be different? Will the cardiovascular health be different? Or will libido and well-being be different? But the one single slide that you must probably pay attention to is that there is no such level at which you can say androgen deficiency, no such syndrome to say that androgen deficiency is noted, and the Endocrine Society strongly recommends against making a clinical diagnosis of any such thing in healthy women, be it premenopausal or postmenopausal. We spoke about the challenges with doing testosterone assays. The recommended method for looking for free testosterone is the LCMS method, which is unavailable in most cities. Even in Bangalore, we have very few centers who can give you a robust LCMS report of free testosterone. So the inference from this sentence is that there is no normative data for testosterone, and below which you can say that this is androgen deficiency in women per se. So when should you not treat, or when should you not consider androgens at all? Infertility. So infertility is one of those areas where you kind of bend the rules, because you are now going to the point where you're saying, yadavadu pandi, let us have a baby which is forming. So there is use of growth hormone, there is use of GnRH agonist, GnRH antagonist, any combination of medications. In this particular space, there is some evidence to suggest that if you supplement androgen, that the amount of follicles which are recruited in each ovulation cycle goes up, but that is reported in some studies and not universally replicated. So clear message to everybody in the room that there is no role of androgen in women who are seeking treatment for infertility as part of any IVF cycle per se. Then bone and metabolic health will be of interest for the physicians in this room, that there is no evidence to suggest that androgen replacement will improve bone health. Maybe it does, but we have many more safer medications with very well well followed up evidence to suggest that they can offer more benefit than harm, and no evidence of any use of androgens affecting cognition or cardiovascular health or general well-being per se. So that's like a clear no. If you notice, most of this talk is about don't test, don't treat, don't think of androgen deficiency, okay? The only condition in which you can consider androgen therapy is what is referred to as hypoactive sexual desire disorder, in which there is some weak evidence to suggest that androgen replacement can be of some use, and that too short term, 3 to 6 months. Now, hypoactive sexual desire disorder, I do not want to go there, but I have to go there, okay, is a very difficult diagnosis to make, right? And you cannot ignore the many socio-cultural factors which affect the sexual experience of a woman, right? So you are through school and college taught not to speak to boys, not to look at boys, not to hang out with boys, and suddenly you're supposed to have a fantastic sexual experience with a stranger. It seems odd for any stretch of imagination. We are not at all talking about the amount of emotional labor that women carry, about how most women are exhausted all days caring for all the people in the house, including the partner who happens to be the sexual partner. In most times, they are never equal partners, but is another person that needs to be managed. So if you're willing to address all of this, we can then give androgens to women with hypoactive sexual desire. So if you are going to give, and this is evidence which has been published, for women with this diagnosis of hypoactive sexual disorder, the evidence suggests that for a duration of about 52 weeks, transdermal testosterone was administered at the rate of 300 micrograms versus placebo, and these were postmenopausal women. They noticed that there was a slight improvement in the number of episodes of sexual encounters which were more sexually satisfying, and also the clinical response rates. But of course, you have to rule out other issues going on. So we have a clinic in which we have a urologist, a gynecologist, and a psychologist involved before we even think of anything like this happening in our hospital per se. And even if you start, if there is no normal testosterone value after which you will start treatment, but it's important that you monitor the testosterone level after you administer transdermal testosterone. So you need to check the testosterone, let's say 6 weeks from now, and then 3 months and 6 months. And if there is no clinically reported improvement in the experience for the woman, we need to make sure that we stop treatment and do not indefinitely treat. So this is again a weak recommendation, and I think this is a diagnosis which doesn't even get made in our clinics per se. Now, the only approved treatment happens to be transdermal testosterone. The other androgen which is studied is DHEA, which is approved for intravaginal use in some countries, approved in the USA, and it is approved in the genitourinary syndrome, which happens in menopause. But if you actually review literature, the evidence is stronger for vaginal use of estrogen than vaginal use of DHEAs, even for the genitourinary syndromes of menopause. This guideline from the Endocrine Society is slightly old, not updated in the last few years, and that's probably why this approval still holds. But it's important to know that there's an FDA-approved treatment for genitourinary syndrome, which is vaginal DHEA. Now, the vaginal DHEA, how it works is it works through conversion by the 5-alpha reductase to testosterone and estrogen at the level of the local environment, and nothing related to the systemic absorption of the molecule per se. Yeah, and when should you not treat? We spoke about these conditions, that when somebody is having an oophorectomy, you're now worried, you've removed the androgen source, should you treat? No, there's no evidence to treat. Should you treat in hypopituitarism, adrenal insufficiency, where the ACH drive is low, ACTH drive is low, and you're worried about adrenal androgens? Do not treat. Anorexia nervosa is a situation in which the entire hypothalamic pituitary system is intact and functioning, but there is suppression of this because of the fact that there is a BMI which is very below what is necessary for well-being. So in these situations, giving estrogen and progesterone is something which we do to preserve bone health, but there is no evidence to replace androgens in this space. And similarly, in extreme sarcopenia also, we were trying to see if androgens could improve appetite, improve weight, improve muscle mass, but management of HIV and the wasting associated with it has gotten better over the years, and we don't need to rely on androgens to help us there. The transdermal route is the only one which is preferred, primarily because it bypasses the liver, which essentially means that the adverse effects related to the lipids in terms of lowering of HDL is lesser if you're using transdermal. Clearly, no indications for starting oral or any other systemic or injectable form of testosterone or DHEAs for women for androgen insufficiency. So you should be aware that most of this treatment is off-label. You have to make sure that you screen for breast CA, and also that pregnancy is a category X per se. So quickly to summarize, androgen deficiency is not a scientifically sound diagnosis in women, be it women with diagnosed endocrine conditions like premature ovarian insufficiency or primary adrenal insufficiency, definitely not a diagnosis in postmenopausal women who are healthy. Routine testing for androgen for deficiency is not advised. You might test for testosterone in other situations where you're looking at hirsutism and virilization. Hypoactive sexual desire syndrome is the only approved condition for treatment with transdermal testosterone. Again, I think the diagnosis itself needs a revision, and I don't think you can make this diagnosis as a medical diagnosis without factoring social and cultural factors affecting it. And even if you're treating, it's a short course, and clearly other conditions don't need. So essentially, don't test, don't treat, let women be. Thank you.